Hi, I'm Owen, the host of the Australian Finance Podcast. This podcast is proudly sponsored by BetaShares, one of the leading providers of ETFs here in Australia. Serving thousands of financial advisors and over 1 million investors, BetaShares manages tens of billions of dollars on behalf of investors right across the country. I'm proud to partner with BetaShares on the Australian Finance Podcast, Australia's premier financial podcast, because there is great alignment in the long-term philosophy shared by both businesses. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Australian Finance Podcast.
Tahli, welcome to this episode of the Australian Finance Podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
We're very excited to introduce you to our community. So Tahli is one of our new senior advisors. So you will be hearing a lot from her, seeing her on our socials. And if you use Rask Advice at some point in the future, she may be your advisor. If you use one of our free courses or one of the resources online on the website in the community that we have, like the community forum that we have, you'll see her popping up there as well. So I'm very excited to introduce you to our wonderful community of listeners. And if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see that we're pretty much dressed the same today.
We are. We've really both hit the brief today.
Yeah. Which I think one of the recent podcasts Owen and I did, we were wearing the same sweater.
I feel like it's less weird if it's me and you that turn up matching.
Yeah. I was like, who wore it better? Okay, so tell us a little bit about yourself, your career, and what brought you to become a financial advisor?
Yeah, well, I guess it's been a pretty long journey for me. I didn't start off in financial planning. I think a lot of people that you speak to in the industry have come from a very unique background and have found this roundabout way to eventually end up in advice, 10 years into their career or whatever it might be. And I was similar. So I guess we really don't talk about financial planning as a career when we're going through schooling. I also grew up in regional Victoria. And when I say regional, I mean my graduating class in year 12 had 30 students. So proper country, came from the sticks. During schooling, we had one business subject, but we didn't have accounting or anything like that on offer. Economics was foreign concept. I don't think there's a financial planner in the town at all. There was one accounting practice, so everyone went to the same accountant. I finished school. I actually started off coming to Melbourne to study architecture. So similar to Sophie from our office here, had that chaotic experience. I lasted 6 weeks in the course before I was so burnt out and was just like, this is absolutely not for me. I can't have this little sleep for the rest of my life. And then I did what any 18-year-old student does at that point when you're scrambling and clutching for something to fall into. I decided to do a Bachelor of Business. So I did my Bachelor of Business. I initially started off in marketing because I was like, it's creative. I'm used to being in the creative space, hence being in architecture. And then I had my core unit in accounting and I loved it. I was like, this is cool. And then I did economics and business stats and I was like, oh my God, I think I'm finding—
You found your niche.
Yeah, this is so much fun. Never thought you'd hear that in a sentence. So anyway, I did all of that. And then at the same time, I was, again, from country town. So I was working right through my university degree and got quite lucky with various jobs in the fitness industry and really good mentors who helped me kind of get into a head office role with a really large franchising business and was helping business owners to help grow their own studios and spent a lot of time, I guess, sitting down with them and explaining their P&Ls and how to look at their business from a numbers perspective and try and grow. And I guess from spending more time doing that over and over and over, I realized that, the numbers side of things definitely isn't everyone's cup of tea. And then COVID hit. So being in the fitness industry during COVID was an awful time, but it also meant that I could sit down and have some breathing room to realize this wasn't everything that I wanted to be doing with my time. So I actually did a career quiz online.
Oh, that's. I've actually looked at doing those several times. Every time I was like burnt out from financial planning, and I was like,
my gosh,
what else can I do? Hopefully,
get me out of this space.
Yeah.
No, so I did the career quiz and it recommended financial planning, and I'd never heard of it until that point. But it was like an immediate light bulb moment, as cliche as that is, and I was like, oh, this is the perfect blend of working with people plus combining sitting down and looking at numbers all day, every day. Like that sounds like a dream to me. And then like not a lot of other people, but during COVID, I also got quite obsessive with building my own portfolios. And at that point, I would never do it again now, but I was looking at individual stock selection and got really into it. So it was a almost immediate decision for me that I'm going to pivot and go into financial planning. So I did my graduate diploma and started applying for jobs straight away. And it obviously didn't happen immediately. It was a pretty long slog to finally get a job in the space, which, for good reason. I had absolutely no experience in finance whatsoever. But I, again, got quite lucky with a few mentors that were working, I guess, adjacent to advice, and ended up, working closely in the mortgage broker world, and then through there eventually got into financial planning, and now we're here.
And it's so good to have all that other experience as well, because it just makes it so much easier when you've seen the business side, the cash flow, the mortgage broking, all of that makes financial planning so much easier because it's also interlinked, even though they're separate professions, roles and things.
Yeah. And I think properties and mortgages are a concept that a lot of people can quite easily grab onto and understand, whereas when we talk about investing through shares, it can be suddenly super daunting.
It feels so foreign, right? Because we can't see it, we can't touch it. And I think it's because, like, if we look at the people around us, how they built their wealth and things, it's a lot more talked about, and our parents, generally had property and things. So it's just more common. It's a lot less scary. So property is a lot less scary for a lot of people.
Yeah. And I think being able to now bring that into financial planning and talk about some of the concepts that we talk about every day, and tie it into, or I guess use property as an analogy, it makes it so much more relatable for people.
Yeah. And we're now in a stage where realistically property might not be the vehicle that everybody builds their wealth through, or some people build their wealth through. So people are more open to learning about other strategies, and there are more and more education resources out there that make it easy to learn about things that we don't have to just learn about one strategy from the people closest to us.
Yeah, you're so right. And I think what I hear is a lot of people with the property space, if they do go about it on their own accord without having a professional to help guide them through it now, can often go into it expecting the same sort of like magic results that we saw from our parents' generation, which is just not the case anymore. You've got to be very, very well researched to make a lot from property nowadays. Or you've got to have a really huge capital base to go into it with, which obviously a lot of clients and the general population don't have.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot more difficult. So that brings us to what I guess the topic of today's episode's going to be about. And we thought it would be a fun one to go through today, something that would really apply to everybody. So what Tahli and I are going to be jumping into shortly is through different decades of your life. So I find that most people, or most financial concepts, kind of focus on milestones and different things, which is probably appropriate, but we're going to have a little bit of a different take. We're going to go based on, your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, your 50s, and then your 60s. What would be our kind of advice or focus, what we think you should be focusing on at these types of at these age brackets? Obviously, everybody's situation is going to be completely different on what their goals are and where they're headed. And as always, if we do mention any financial products or strategies, it is just for education purposes. It is not financial advice. You should always seek financial advice before that you do anything, whether that's with Rask Advice, your trusted advisor. Just make sure you do your own research. This is for education and entertainment purposes only. So that's always our big disclaimer. But before we jump into that, actually, we had a really great client this week. Well, a juicy client. We should talk about them.
Yeah, they were very, very interesting set of circumstances.
Yes. So for those who don't know, we have Rask Advice, which, you can get financial advice. You can always also just book in for like a free 15-minute chat with somebody at Rask if you're just not sure on which free resources you should be using. If there's a podcast episode you're trying to find, if there's a course online that you need, or you just need some direction. If you're feeling stuck and you're not sure, you can actually just book in, go to the website and book in a 15-minute chat. But if you know that financial advice is for you and you're kind of looking for an advisor, we do what's called discovery calls, which every financial advice firm does. And it's to see if you're a good fit for the firm and how their fees work, how you'll work with the advisor, if you gel with them, all that kind of stuff. So Tahli and I had one of these appointments this week, and it was so good that it ran so over. And then we were like, you've got to keep us updated. We were pretty much like, the outcome was, we can't help you right now for advice because so much is going on, but can you please keep us updated, and can we stay on this journey with you? Yeah. So do you want to give us some context about what was going on?
Yeah. Gosh, where do I start? Okay, so the clients, they're in a partnership. They're a married couple, currently living in Australia, but they... a lot of moving parts. So the biggest piece of the puzzle that I guess we need to unpack, and why we can't provide advice just yet, is because they are in the process of receiving a large inheritance. But the inheritance is in the form of property that's based in another country. The additional layer of complexity as well is that it's not just one property parcel, it's several. And then as we often see, unfortunately more often than we would like to see, is family disputes come into play, as often happens when there is a large estate to deal with. Has that been your experience as well? I think it's one of those things where a lot of people expect the best outcome from an estate, and unfortunately it can often open up a can of worms and lead to family breakdowns. Yeah,
so money and family rarely mix, and then you add all the stress of losing a loved one and all of that type of stuff. It can really get super messy. And I kind of find that even if somebody gets... I often find that even if somebody gets an inheritance and it is straightforward, they will sometimes have a lot of guilt on what to do with it, and even taking actions really hard. But then, on the flip side, it can be, well, these people in this case are ready to take action. They know exactly, they're very clear on their goals and what they could do with this, but they're in this holding pattern and they're in this dispute, and they could go one way, which they walk away with a significant amount of less, but it's like, well, what's the stress? How long is this going to go through court? It's in a different country. What's this? How does this impact your other goals and all of this kind of stuff? So there's so many layers to this one. And, one of their options was, so we've told them that we can't give them advice. They need to get advice from an overseas lawyer, accountant, and probably a financial advisor, which they're in the process of. We're going to give them advice when they're ready on, their superannuation and things here. But we're keep us updated with this because we love it. We love I think she was apologized. She was like, I'm so sorry, we're just going into all this detail and we're dragging you into this. And we're like, no, the detail, the better. We loved it. Yeah. But they were I love that they were just so clear on their goals. But one of their options was they could keep this property and they were thinking of developing it. But when we talked to them about, well, you had just told us all your personal goals, want to be retired in 2 years, feel like you don't spend enough time together, all of these beautiful things, want to be hiking more, want to be doing all of this.
Their goals were really cool.
And very specific. Yeah. And then they go, oh, what if we keep the property and develop it? I'm like, are you going to go live over there? Are you going to hire someone to do that? Does that actually, does that hold you back from your goals even more? And yes, you might make money from that, but it might also cost a lot of money. Also, they had, because they don't live over there, borrowing for the stages of a development would potentially be very, very tricky. But it pretty much comes down to, I think, with anything, like there's a trade-off, right? And it's got to be that, yes, because you can, I think I even said it to her, just because you can do something, like you could develop it and make more money, doesn't mean you should. Like you need to think of all the other
I think people are always surprised when they hear that sort of response from an advisor too, that we can give you an on paper best financial outcome, but that's not always what we actually recommend, because our relationship with the client is about more than that. It's about understanding your actual value-based goals and helping you to achieve those. And they look so different from person to person. So it's not just necessarily a clear cut, okay, let's fill in a quantitative fact find and we're going to build out a strategy purely based off that. It goes so much deeper than that. And that's why I think like this job is the best job in the world.
Yeah. And I think that's what they were expecting, kind of us to go, well, we'll put together some advice on which will give you the best financial outcome. And we were kind of like, no, you need to go away and sort this out because we can't do this, provide the advice on this, but we want you to get really clear on your goals and imagine what that process is going to look like. And then the other task we gave them was, at what point is it worth it dragging it out X amount of years? Because there were all these expenses that were about to start coming up. So we were like, not only are you going to start paying them, but then what is the uptick that you would be happy that you dragged this out for a few years? You went through the stress, you put all those goals on hold. And that's not for either of us to say, like nobody can put a price on that, only they can. So yeah, and that will be very different from person to person. So we were kind of like, well, that's your homework. I want you to go away and think about that kind of stuff. You know, for someone that might be 50,000, to somebody else, it might be $1 million. Like who knows?
Yeah. It's really cool. How's that homework from your financial advisor that you've not yet engaged?
Yeah, we can't help you, but these are the things we want you to think about. And please keep us updated with the stuff. It was it was a great one. But let's jump into the actual episode. So first off, we are kicking off with the 20s. So as in the age bracket, people in their 20s, what do you think that they should be focusing on with their finances for their 20s?
I think 20s is often a really undervalued decade, and it can be a really critical period for building an amazing foundation, or it can be a total write-off and you're starting with a clean slate in your 30s. And I think that's the critical thing about your 20s. It doesn't have to be sacrificing all of your lifestyle goals and preferences to have this rigid budget. It's not about that at all. It's just starting to learn, I think, is what is most important in your 20s, and getting the basics right. Like you don't have to cipher off 70% of your income into savings, but you should be getting yourself to a point in your 20s where you understand what is coming in and you understand what's going out and you understand the breakdown of what's going where. I think that's, from my perspective, the most important thing in your 20s.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I had foundations like those good habits. So your money in, money out. I think I see two types of attitudes. Obviously, this is generalizing, but like you just kind of mentioned, people either see it as a write-off, like this doesn't matter, I'll start later, or people see it as I need to get ahead and they put a lot of pressure on themselves, which I was that person. So I don't think it needs to be the slingshot that we put pressure on ourselves to be, but what it shouldn't be is something that when you decide to get serious, if it's 25, 30 or 35, that you're now paying for, and you're, you want to be when you're ready, you want the starting line to be the starting line and not be recovering from bad decisions that you made early on when you weren't focused on your money.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Credit card debt is just ringing alarm bells everywhere.
Get into good habits. Don't rely on buy now, pay later's credit cards. Like if you are going to have a credit card, like I know some people love them. I can't, because I cannot have one because it changes my behavior. I And
I literally was researching them again this morning to try and convince myself to be that person who's all over the points.
I want to be the points person.
Oh, same. And I've heard the best stories about it, but yeah, not my personality. Can't do it either.
No. So I know that about myself. But yeah, so you, in your 20s, you should be focusing on really good habits that are going to set you up. And if you're, like education, like learning about your finances, as many free resources as you can. But yeah, if it potentially doesn't need to be a slingshot to building all of your wealth, but it shouldn't be the time that you are repaying for the rest of your life.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Cool. All right, 30s.
30s is a fun one. I think 30s is, for me, part of it anyway, just part of it, is to get comfortable with debt. And I think I'm coming at that from the perspective of someone who is quite averse to debt and also quite conservative with all areas of risk. So if you're on the flip side, it could be very different. But I think if you really want to get serious about growing your wealth, that debt plays a very important role in that.
It does. Debt is not the enemy. Debt is a tool. And it's how you use it that is good or bad, which is pretty much like a credit card, right? It's just a tool. Most people use it badly, like me.
Yeah. I think it can be really helpful for magnifying your I guess your growth trajectory. And the other really important thing for your 30s is building a professional network.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
And that should be, a really good accountant, a really good mortgage broker, and perhaps a really good financial advisor as well. Or not even someone that you necessarily are engaged on yet for a financial plan, but someone who can give you casual education around your finances.
Trusted sources for information, because we're bombarded with experts, right? Like social media and all of that kind of stuff. I think that's a really, really good thing. So shameless plug, like in my book that's coming out in August, I refer to it as a village, and it's like, you need these specific people in your life, and it's like the cheerleader, the accountability partner, and some of them will be the same people, and then there's like the professional, the mentor, like all of those types of stuff. But I think the earlier you can do that, and we probably should have mentioned like in your 20s, like when you're doing that foundation stuff, your career is like so important.
Try all the things.
Yeah, just getting really, like getting your income. Your ability to earn income is going to be one of the biggest investments that you have in your life. So I did put in my notes here for 30s that it might actually be the time. I see a lot of families where they feel they probably are actually like going backwards, because they might be having kids. One person might be off work raising the kids. They might have just gone into debt for property, and they actually feel like this is the time we need to be getting ahead and we're going backwards, but they don't see that overall they are moving forwards. It just feels really, really hard at the time. So if somebody is off work because they're off paid work, because they're raising a family or whatever, you should be still career or income focused. So things that you can be doing while you're not in paid employment is keeping that network, like your professional network, keeping up to date with different things, making sure that your skills are still relevant, like all of that kind of stuff. Like still enjoy your time out for sure. But if it's going to be a few years, like you want to make sure that you are still in contact if you're going to be going back into that industry. That can make a big difference, and it can feel like, you're not doing anything day to day for your career when that's no longer the focus, but there are some things that you can still kind of keep checking in, and that gives you a bit of sense of self outside, just your new role, which might be mum or dad.
Yeah, that's so important. If I put on the financial planner lens for a second too, I think the other two critical steps that I would recommend at this stage, one of them is just doing a pulse check on your super. I think if you're going through that entire decade with, and I've seen it before, funds that, you accidentally, or not accidentally, at some point back in the day, you've decided to change your investment option over to all cash. And I've seen it where it's been left
about
in that for a really long period. And your 30s is a huge opportunity for growing your super balance. And if it's just been sitting in cash for that entire time, it's a huge opportunity loss. So I think pulse check on super. And then the other thing is get insured.
Yeah, the insurance is a big one as well. And like these are all important at every stage, right, to have the check-ins. But if there was one particular focus, I think you're right, like understanding your super and just checking in with it, because small tweaks make a huge difference. And you don't want this to be something that you start learning about in your late 50s. You know, like the sooner you start engaging with your super, which is your money, the easier it is for you to understand it and actually feel like you have assets. Like if you feel like cash flows really hard, the mortgage is big, like life is just a hard slog, chances are you've got superannuation that's an investment portfolio. So there's something for you to get excited about and look at it, you know.
Yeah.
So engage with it. And small tweaks like your investment allocation, right-sizing your insurance, potentially there's insurance premiums coming out of there. You need to look at all of that stuff, because it will make a big difference on your retirement outcome when you're ready to pull the pin with work. The other thing that I had there is for 30s, I would have on my radar, me personally, I love property. So I would be wanting to get into a property in that decade. But if there are lots of ways to build wealth and you don't have to build wealth through property. So in that decade, I would want you to get really clear on how you're going to build wealth. And it doesn't have to be property, but maybe it's a share portfolio or whatever it is. Yeah, but you be really clear on this is my strategy.
Yeah.
And it might be that and that can change, right? Like it doesn't have to be, but you have some direction so that you're working towards maybe learning about it, so that down the track in your 40s that you have more disposable income, you can then put more into that strategy or something. But just having some direction there.
Yeah.
I think the direction is the most important thing, because imagine, I think a lot of people don't need to imagine, it's probably happened, that they've got to the point where they go, I don't know if property's on the cards for me. And then imagine having to learn about all these other strategies and things that are so foreign. I want people to be doing that as early as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. And just taking some steps forwards. Yeah. You know, I think people get caught up in this whole decision paralysis.
Yeah. Analysis paralysis. Yeah, but
that
there's
sounds
so many
really
options.
Funny rolling off the tongue.
Yeah.
But yeah, and you don't have to do everything all at once. Like it can be bite-sized chunks as long as you're doing something.
Yeah. And you can change your strategy as well. Like maybe you start investing in shares a small amount and then you decide property is for you, or you start saving for your deposit and you get a really sizable amount and then you decide it's not for you. Well, there you go. There's a kickstart for your investment portfolio. Like other than buying a property, which yes, you can sell. Like a lot of the strategies are pretty flexible.
Yeah.
But getting into property is expensive. It's expensive to get into and expensive to get out of it. But they're the kind of things that I would want, like from an early 30s, just to start thinking about how are you going to turn your ability to earn income into assets that are going to provide income to you.
Yep. Love it.
Cool. 40s.
40s.
This will be me next year.
Oh my God. I think 40s is a big one. I feel like 40s is where life gets expensive.
Don't tell me that.
Sorry.
Great.
Things to look forward to. 40s is typically, school fees can get super expensive. Sometimes in your 40s, it's a chance to do a bit of an asset restructure. I think 40s is where people start getting serious about, the 30s, they were taking steps forwards, hopefully. They might have had a bit of a plan of attack, but it might have been a bit loose. And then the 40s is like, okay, I've built something. Now I need to consolidate and make it optimized.
Yeah. I feel like, that's right. They were kind of, before it was just like kind of throwing like darts, like and just wondering where they'll land. And then in their 40s, they're kind of like, no, we know the direction. Yeah. But I wish people did that a bit earlier, but yeah.
Yes. I mean, in an ideal world, yes. But in reality, unfortunately, no.
Yeah.
So I think, that's the biggest one for me is restructuring assets, making sure everything is efficient from a tax perspective is a really big one in your 40s. And I sound like a broken record, but I think in your 40s, again, it's another pulse check on things. Where's my super? Do I need to be doing something a little bit more strategic now? Am I looking like I'm on the right trajectory that I want to be in for my 50s? Because then 50s is where things get serious.
Yeah. And people start caring a lot more.
Yeah.
40s, I totally agree. Like the structure and things is very important. And if you haven't cared about it previously, like now is the time then. A lot of the time it's great then to be focusing on non-tax deductible debt. There's so many cool strategies you can do. Get advice. But I would say from a behavior perspective, not avoiding, but being very aware of like lifestyle creep or income inflation creep or whatever. Like there's so many different ways that it's called. But I find this is where people start going, we're ready for the bigger house. We're ready for the bigger car. Actually, we no longer camp in tents. We now want the 80,000 caravan. And I find that, the living standard goes up pretty significantly, and that can actually set your goals, like your financial trajectory back a lot. Yeah. So that is absolutely fine. Money is a tool to be enjoyed, but you want to make sure that it's within your means and that it's not going to stop you from doing the next thing that might be actually more important to you. So if you are doing those things, I want people to be doing them because it really aligns with what they want for their life, not because they had this invisible checklist in their head that was what success looked like, or because all their friends were doing it, or whatever. That's where I see that happening in the 40s.
Yeah, that's really important, because I think as well, when you're throwing pasta on the wall and hoping something sticks in your 30s, the scale is a lot smaller, whereas when you're doing it in your 40s, often you have built up a capital base. So shameless plug, but I think if you're going to make those big financial investments or decisions rather in your 40s, like that's where you really need the professional guidance to help make the best decisions. Yeah.
And sometimes it can just be talking to somebody else to stress test your goals and your values and things, because we get caught up in an idea, and it might be, a couple. So like two people in a relationship that have conflicting goals, and they need a third party to help them get on the same page with their money values. And we always talk about, if it's not financial advice, it might be a money coach, or if you're really struggling at any stage, there's amazing free services like debt counselors and financial counselors and different things. So I think that's probably really important to note as well, that we're talking about all of this if you're kind of doing well and you've got great options, but at any time that you're not, there are services, and I'll link some of them in the chat. But I guess it flows onto all of them that at any stage, you don't want to have your head in the sand about your financial position. You want to be in control of it, and you want to be making choices for you today, but also for future you.
Yeah. I think a big thing in that life stage as well is being extra mindful around debt. And taking on new debt, because I coming from mortgage background as well, I know that, and it's not the case everywhere, but most cases you're being assessed for loans on a 30-year loan term.
Still in that age group, right?
Yeah. So if you're going through, and applying for a huge loan in your 40s, just think about that.
Chances are it's going to be a lot easier to borrow too, because you've probably built up equity. You might be earning a bit better. Kids might be at school. You might be back on a dual income. So the banks do like you. And then you can finance all this stuff. That's where that lifestyle creep probably comes in, because it is so much easier to buy stuff.
Yeah. So again, just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Love it. 50s. Now, this is probably where both of us, like our jam, right? Like, because we do a lot of stuff in pre-retirement.
Yeah, 50s is fun.
Yes. So this is, this one here is where I try to get people as excited as possible about their super. Well, I try to do that from like the day they're born, but I try to make sure that people are really, really engaged with their super. And my whole thing is from 60, you can do so much cool stuff with your superannuation, like transition to retirement strategies and things that are going to help you in lots of different ways, depending on your needs, goals and objectives, not advice. So that means that by the time you turn 60, you want as many options as possible. Yeah. So you got to do the work in the decade before. So 50 to 60 is so important for super to mean that it opens up the doors for all of that super nerdy strategies that we love.
Yeah, exactly. I think 50s is all about, again, not for absolutely everyone, but a lot of the time 50s is about trying to get as much into super as possible.
Yeah, and usually you've got to commonly we'll see people with a bit more disposable income. Their debt might be a bit more under control. They might have less expenses for the kids, maybe no education expenses. Potentially their careers are kind of up. They're working more. It kind of seems like more discretionary income across the household, and they just need a bit of a plan and direction for it. So they might be focusing on debt. They might be focusing on super, all of that type of stuff. You know, they might have some other assets. But this is like this is why so many financial advice firms focus on this age group, because there's so much that you can do. And we know that advice fees are expensive in Australia, and advisors, you know, they need to show value, and we can't see everybody. There's great advisors that would love to see everybody, but realistically, you know, the biggest bang for your buck I see with advice clients is kind of in this range generally. So this is why it's much easier to get a financial advisor at this stage. But you also have the means generally, the disposable income, the super balances to kind of support the advice fee a little bit better. Yeah,
double-edged sword though, isn't it? Because if we are leaving it until this time, sometimes it can be a little bit too late.
Yes.
Particularly if someone has been self-employed and, you know, not really gone through the coaching early on in that process around what is the long-term vision for this business. Am I creating a sellable business, or am I using the business as a vehicle to get me into a healthy financial position so I can retire when I want to?
Yeah, that's Owen and I talked about that on a podcast that went out a few before this, and it was like, you know, is my business an investment? And we're like, well, potentially, but regardless, you need to make sure that you're also building diversified assets.
I did listen to that.
Because I see so many business owners that just put their heart and soul, everything into their business, and then potentially it's not a sellable asset in retirement, or it can't produce the income that they need. And, you know, that's typical all eggs in one basket, which we want to make sure that you can do that, but you can also have assets outside.
Yeah. Should we talk about a few of the different ways of maximising super through your 50s? Like, should we just touch on a few of them?
Big disclaimer, not financial advice, factual information only. But yeah, absolutely. Jump into it.
Yeah, because I think that's the other thing that can often be missed, I guess, if you're going about this on your own, is that the timing of things is so important because you've got annual limitations as to how much you can put into super dependent on the type of contribution that you're making. So we kind of, in most instances, we're wanting to stagger it out at least over a couple of years at a minimum. So the big two that we're looking at that period of time is whether you can access a bring forward contribution. So you're putting 3 years worth of your non-concessional contributions into super in the one financial year.
Yeah, so that would suit. So that's your after-tax money. So that would suit people that have potentially maybe got an inheritance, or, you know, because we know that most inheritance come to people in their 50s or 60s, you know. So that might be inheritance. They might have sold a property. They might have started downsizing, that type of stuff. I nerd out over a strategy with this, not financial advice, is I see people when they do it themselves, they will do what's the cap at the moment? 120.
120.
Yeah, so they'll do the 360
in 1 year instead of
doing, and so like if you were going to do it now, you potentially would do 120 and then wait till July and do the 360 and you've just got more, because when you bring forward that 3 years, it means that you're doing the cap for this year and then you're not going to do any more after tax for the next 2 years. Whereas if you used one financial year and didn't trigger that rule and then triggered it, you've really got 4 years in a really short amount of time.
Yep. But then really important to be mindful of, limitations around
your balance and things like really impact that as well. So, you can get financial advice. You can get lots of information on the ATO website. You don't always need financial advice to make these decisions. We say that because it protects us, not because we're trying to get you to go to Rask Advice or our partners. We obviously believe in advice and there's so many areas. But this is stuff that you can work out yourself, like on the ATO website, looking at contribution caps and things. Potentially you can talk to your superannuation fund. They might not give personal advice, but they can give you factual advice. But if you are not sure, this is stuff that you don't want to get wrong. So you would get a financial advisor.
Yep.
Cool. So that's one of them. What's the other one?
Cool. The other one is your carry forward contributions. That one I find at this stage is, and again, it really depends on the circumstances, but most often I find that super balances are too high in your 50s to be able to use the carry forward.
And what do you mean by too high?
If you've got over a $500,000 balance in your super, you can't use the carry forward contribution.
Yeah, so it's an opportunity. If you have under 500,000, you're able to use some of your unused cap for the last 5 years, a rolling period.
Yeah,
which is a really good opportunity. Like business owners, for example, that potentially weren't able to pay themselves superannuation contributions, people that were focusing on debt and didn't have surplus income. It's like, well, your cap isn't lost now. You'll say, if work could just put the minimum in, it used to be use it or lose it. And like the cap's currently 30,000. It used to be, if you didn't use all of that, that was gone. Whereas now it rolls forwards for 5 years, 4 years plus.
I get stuck on this one all the time. I'm 99% sure now, because I've read it over and over again to try and drill this in, but I'm sure it's 5 years plus the current year.
Yeah. I think it is too, because I think I was actually always explaining it in workshops as like, I think I was actually explaining it wrong. This is how complicated superannuation is, that even financial advisors are going, my God.
That is MyGov, whatever MyGov says.
Yeah, perfect. And I was explaining this in a general sense incorrectly, not as a financial advisor. But yes, so that is a really good one. So that one is pre-tax, so that's consider that like salary sacrifice. But yeah, if your balance is under 500,000, potentially you have some room for that. But if you're not sure, you can always jump onto your MyGov account, look at it. So head to MyGov, you go to the ATO link, you can see your there's a superannuation tab. You can look for lost super. You can see what accounts they've got listed for you at different super funds, and you can see your contributions and what caps you might have available. Yeah, they're good ones. And then that brings us to the 60s.
60s, again, great time.
Nerd out on this as financial advisors.
Yeah, and it's the most rewarding time, I think, as a financial advisor, because you're stepping someone through something that's been a life goal for years and years or decades, and finally being able to give them that green tick to say, you are in a position now to step away from full-time employment. And for a lot of people nowadays too, I think the goal isn't necessarily to stop working fully. I think it's just to be able financially to at least perhaps leave that corporate job that they haven't wanted to be in for years and go do something that fills the cup a little bit more. Or maybe it's, I still want to keep working in my own business, but I want to do it as more of a hobby now. And I want to do 2 days a week instead of 5. So I think 60s, a big part of 60s is mapping that out and finding the sweet spot balance of now I can access my super, but do I want to? And that's another thing. Again, coming back to you can, but should you? Sometimes it might be better to not access your super for a period of time. So being really strategic around that can really set the trajectory for retirement. And retirement as well, it's really important to think about it in your 60s that retirement isn't 10 years. Like it could be 30, 40 years. So there's a huge time period there to fund.
Yeah. And I think here, like there's so many, I'm going to get grilled in the comments for saying cool strategies, nerd out, but there's so many like amazing things that you can do. Like you can have, you could access your super to get a lump sum, like it's a pension, but like potentially up to 10% if you're still working to pay out debt or to work less or to be able to salary sacrifice. Like there's so many different things that you can do. You could retire from a job, you could go and focus on passion projects, but I think people just knowing that you have choice is really, really important. It's not, and this is even like the financial independence, retire early, like at any age. I don't think it's actually about retiring and doing nothing. It's about knowing that you can is the most important. But where I see people struggle here in their 60s that I think it's really important to focus on is the mindset and back to the habits, because potentially through your 30s, 40s and 50s, you have picked up habits that have been fine while you've been working. Maybe you've been relying on a credit card, putting all your expenses, not really looking at what you're spending, and it just worked because you had this salary coming in. Superannuation or your retirement income stream, maybe it's a share portfolio, maybe it's property, whatever it is, it's not limitless. Well, some people it probably might be, but it's not like, oh, I've spent all my money this fortnight, I'm just going to work again next week. So it's a mindset shift, but also you have to have good habits. Like you have to know roughly what it's going to cost you to live so you can be sure that you're going to have enough money. And yes, we want a lot of flexibility in that. Like we want to make sure you can say yes to all the things that you want to do, but having good habits around your spending, how you manage your cash flow, spending in things that add value to your life, not just, things, value aligned spending. I think all of that becomes really, really important in your 60s, right before retirement. And it makes it so much easier when you transition into retirement, because I see so many people go from living just their best lives while they're working, out for dinner and doing all these things, to then, oh no, I'm drawing on my super and I'm like just a shell of the life that they had because they're so worried about it. And if they had more of a handle on their spending, or they knew what they could spend in retirement, they could start transitioning into that life, or they could just manage their money so they felt more confident. Yeah,
that's the biggest thing, isn't it?
Is really important.
Yeah, and just understanding and being empowered with the knowledge of how much money you have and what that means for you.
Yeah, and like a budget, it gets a bad rap, but doesn't need to be restrictive. Your budget might be $50,000 a year on travel. Like it's just you knowing what you can and what you can't do, and then you making a decision that, well, if I do more than that, it's just a trade-off in some other area. But that, I think people underestimate how important that daily habit of how you manage your money is in retirement, but also how hard it's going to be for them to transition like their self-identity and things. Not everybody. Some people are like, I'm out of here. I see people really struggle with that.
It can also really be quite detrimental to a relationship as well at that point. I had a client who was well and truly ready to retire from farming as well. So really taxing on the body. Him and his wife had sold one of their farms, relocated to their smaller farm, but the plan was to downsize and get onto just move into a smaller home, be able to finally live the comfortable dream retirement life that the wife had been really waiting out for. And that process mentally for him was just too tough. It was, 2 years of working with them over it, and unfortunately, what could have been a really, really financially comfortable retirement lifestyle for them ended up dwindling away because it was clutching at sustaining a business that was not profitable, and then it became clutching at straws and using credit card debt to continue to fund a business that was no longer viable. So that was actually really sad to watch that play out, and to kind of coach both of them individually, because they both had very different objectives of what they wanted out of advice. And yeah, it's devastating, because that mental barrier to leave the workforce, and he admitted it too, that it was a pride thing. He didn't want to be known amongst the community as someone who, in his mind, had failed as a farmer, which was absolutely, like, the farms were doing well.
Yeah.
Really well. So there was no failure there. It was just all a mental thing.
Yeah. It's like, well, my papa, like my grandfather, he was working into his 80s as a stock agent. Like, he loved it, but he just had no identity outside of that. Like it was his everything. And he absolutely loved it. But I just think if you are going to focus on something in here, hopefully you're already on track with things and you're getting advice, you're doing all the other stages. But yeah, I think if you can start shifting into the mindset, if there's hobbies and a lifestyle that you dream of in retirement, start putting some of those things in there. Like, don't be like, I'm going to quit work and then I'm going to take up tennis and this and that and then never have actually tried if you actually like doing that stuff. Just start kind of like ease yourself into it and start enjoying that lifestyle a little bit before, so it's not such a shock to the system.
Yep. And treat the hobbies like a job. Really go in head first.
Yes, I love that. And just, it's like routine and stuff. It seems like it's it's important at all of our ages, right?
Yeah.
Especially kids, but as you get older as well. That was a fun one. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was, lots to go through there. And as I said, definitely not financial advice, but hopefully there's lots of ideas there for people at different stages. And that might be something that's relevant for you. It might be something that's relevant for your parents or your children or somebody. So feel free to share the episode if you think that this could help somebody. And we will absolutely have Tahli back. You're going to be on the retirement podcast next, so the community over there can meet you. I think you're going to chat with Owen. But yeah, I've loved chatting with you. And if you want to find out more about Tahli or have a chat with her, you can find her on the Rask website.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's been so much fun.
We'll chat next time.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching this video on the Rask Network. While you're here, don't forget to like and subscribe so you can get videos each and every day on business, finance, investing, and so much more.